Everything was going fine with us. There was no flak in sight, and we were at the bomb release line. Suddenly, the plane began to jump around as if in prop wash. I then heard a thud and a splintering sound of flak shell ripping into the plane. I looked around and saw that everyone's nose was okay, so I went back looking through the drift meter. I then noticed the plane seemed to be going downhill. Looked around and see Pat and Roy with their shoes up. They were trying to attract my attention and tell me to get my chute on. I jerked off my gloves and grabbed my chute out of the hatchway, snapped it on. The engineer and Colonel Cobb were already in a hatchway trying to get the hatch open. The last flak shell seemed to have jammed the hatch shut and never did come open. After snapping on my chute, I pulled down my goggles, which I always kept on my helmet. I then knelt down at the entrance to the hatchway, waiting my turn to get out. I could see that the cockpit was on fire and was beginning to be choked by the smoke coming through the oxygen system. The plane was diving downward at about a 45-degree angle, and many thoughts were running through my mind. I did not seem to dread the thought of dying, but being trapped in a burning ship and waiting for it to explode or hit the ground was not pleasant. I was getting mighty smoky in the plane, and finally it seemed I could not get my breath at all. I was just about to pass out when all of a sudden the pressure on my lungs was released, and I found myself floating in the midair on my back. I looked up and saw my chute pack on my chest, so I reached and pulled the little red handle. It came out so easily that I figured the explosion must have ruined my chute. So I opened up, and only two holes near the top. I began to look around and soon found by sight and feeling that both my hands were burned. There was no skin on the back of the left hand. So I decided then that the parachute was really quite an invention. There was nothing to jumping. Finally, I started oscillating in my chute, so I grabbed the shroud lines, tried to stop it as I had been taught. My hands were so tender that I could not do no good, so I just let it go. I began to look around and saw pieces of a plane floating down around me. Also, a parachute with no one on it. Above me and in the distance, I could see two other chutes as I got near the ground, which seemed like 15 or 20 minutes to me. I looked to see where I was going to land and tried to turn my chute so that I would be facing downwind. I could not turn it, try as I may. The last few hundred feet, it seems the ground came rushing up to me all at once after having been floating down for such a long time. I lit in an open field about 50 yards from the road and went flat on my back. As I hit the ground, I saw a car on the road near me, but before I could get up strength to get out of my harness, a Frenchman was at my side, helping me out of it. He aided me in getting to my feet and started leading me to his car. I tried to get him to get the chute and hide it, but he dragged it a short way and let it lay. I got into the car and he drove me to his house, which was quite a large country home. There were many people along the road we traveled. I was led upstairs and two ladies started to undress me. When they took off my helmet, it was only half there, and the rest had been torn away in the explosion. This was the first that I knew my head was bleeding. They made motions telling them to cut away my clothes because I could not have them pulled over my hands. They cut the sleeves away, and I was soon undressed, all except my long johns and socks. Mm-hmm. I was then taken to the next room, a bedroom, where there was a large mirror in front of me. I could hardly believe what I saw, and my face was black from the explosion, and the side of my neck and head was covered with blood. There were burns around my eyes, and my eyebrows and eyelids were burned away. I was told to lay down in the bed, but I did so not until they brought a towel, and so I could lay my head on it without seeing blood all over the pillowcase. I was asked if there was anything I'd like to eat or drink, but I said no. I was too numb, too shocked to be hungry. Shortly after this, my bombardier, Bill Patrick, was brought in and laid on the bed beside me. He did not recognize me until I spoke. I told him I was sure glad to see him, and he said he was glad to see me as he figured I had gotten out somehow. His leg and ankle were badly banged up, and one shoe was blown off in the explosion. While waiting for the doctor, one of the ladies scraped some raw potatoes and put it on my hand to relieve the burning. They brought some coffee and wine to drink and told us they had anything we would like to eat. They also told us they could do nothing for us as they would have to turn us over to the Germans. I said it must have been collaborationists to be able to drive a car like that.
Wow.
A short, chubby country doctor came in with a little bag and first looked at Pat's injuries. Then he went to work on me. He put some salve on my hands and then put bandages over the cotton pads. He washed out the cut in my head and then proceeded to sew it up. He put in 3 stitches where there should have been several more. That was plenty for me. While he was working on me, 2 Germans were brought in. I grinned at Pat and said, "Look at them Nazi supermen." They stood as the doctor was finished bandaging my head. The Germans carried us outside and put us on a rear of an open truck and some straw in it.